Good evening, Western Standard viewers, and welcome to Hannaford, a weekly politics show of the Western Standard. It is Thursday, April the 23rd. I hope, we're all ready to jump up and defend free speech, but how are we doing in the fight against compelled speech? There's lots of people who demand you not only see things their way, but say it out loud. Here at the Western Standard, we've got a man suing us who says he's a woman, but we keep calling him a man because he is. But he wants to compel us to say something we know just ain't true. Feel free to donate to our legal defense fund, by the way. Now, another area of compelled speech is the good old Indian land acknowledgement. With me today is somebody who's hit this like a boat hits a rock. With me today is Victoria-based writer George Ramsay. We ran something he wrote about this a few weeks ago, and there's more to be said. George, welcome to the show.
Hi, Nigel. Happy to chat. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. George, you originally wrote this piece for C2C Journal, and what we ran was a bit shorter. So can you just explain why you care about this? You were a university student in Victoria. You were studying kinesiology. So can you explain what happened to you that made you very sensitive to land acknowledgements and why they make you cross?
Yeah, so I think going to university in a place like Victoria in the current day, I have become very sensitive to topics where I feel there's a groupthink element going on and a conformity being imposed. And land acknowledgements were one of those things. I would say I don't care as much specifically about the land acknowledgements. It's just the fact that people lose their ability to think critically about these things. So I was taking a course called Outdoor Adventure Education. And in this course, we had to do an assignment based on land acknowledgements, and we were asked to write a few different essays and writing assignments explaining the benefits of a land acknowledgement. And the premise of the assignments were not that we could openly criticize or say why these things are not helpful or performative. The rubric of the assignment kind of led you down a path of thinking to have like one specific conclusion. And within the classroom, there's just this sort of atmosphere of fear of stepping out of the boundaries when we're having class discussions. Like everyone is silent and afraid to have an opinion that might get you socially ostracized. So that's something that I noticed very strongly. And I felt frustrated that we had this one way of thinking be imposed upon us on ideas that are not really like a concrete right or wrong. It's more of a philosophical discussion. So I think in a university, it should be more of an open discussion rather than you must go down this line of thinking.
George, you're talking like somebody who was born 50 years ago. Come on. Everybody knows that universities these days are places where you pay a lot of money to learn to be indoctrinated in a set of ideas and principles that will enable you to get a job with the federal government. Come on. What were you expecting? Seriously, may I ask, how did you actually challenge this? And what happened when you did?
Yeah, so for my writing assignment for that class, I was a bit frustrated, and I feel like for me, I like to get my thoughts out there, and sort of helps me kind of like cope with being in this environment. So I ended up writing my assignment having a fairly critical perspective, and my writing assignment for that class actually evolved into what I submitted to the C2C journal. And luckily, the professor wasn't actually a total ideologue. He was reasonable and actually gave me 100% mark on this assignment. But I wouldn't have known that going into it because the rubric of the assignment only gave you marks for a positive interpretation of land acknowledgements. So he had to actually break his own rubric and mark mine like very individually. So I was just willing to take that risk, and luckily it worked out fine. But no other students in the class did that. And in fact, I actually saw some other of my classmates' assignments in that course, and they were all praising land acknowledgements, of course. And they probably some of them are written by AI, to be honest, because I can kind of see the language in their responses. But I had one student who came to me in private and said, "Thank you for like writing your assignment that way. Like someone needed to say that. I agree with everything you said." And then I went and read their assignment, and it was completely like a copy paste like appraisal of land acknowledgements in a positive way. So behind the scenes, this person agrees with me, but is too fearful to say that in writing on their assignment, and they're just pandering to what they think the professor will give good marks for. So I think that kind of exposes the problem, is this self-censorship going on in universities on contentious topics like this, where there's this sort of conformity expected of you.
Well, George, I think before I go any further, a lot of people who are watching this segment would probably want me to pause and just congratulate you for having the balls to take it on and just say what you really thought and not what you thought they wanted you to say. So you got your 100% honestly. And of course, this was an essay that was accepted by C2C and later by the Western Standard. And that's a measure of the quality of the work, as well as the courageous stance that you took. So, on behalf of Western Standard viewers generally, well done. Now, you talk about indigenous land acknowledgements as having evolved from optional gestures of respect into effectively mandatory rituals that appear everywhere, from school assemblies. They do it in front of a National Hockey League game, corporate websites, and now they primarily serve not just as a gesture of friendly respect, but to enforce racialized identity politics and historical revisionism of the kind that you have just described, rather than fostering genuine reconciliation. So most people shrug and move on, but is everybody falling for it? Who else is fighting for this? Tell me about some of the people you are writing about.
Sure. So in my piece, I wrote about two cases from Ontario. There was Jeff Horseman and Catherine Cronus. And these are two parents and professionals in Ontario, and they both volunteer on school councils there, two separate unrelated school councils, but they had similar incidents. So I'll start with Jeff Horseman. He was on a school council, and he was getting frustrated with some of the identity politics being imposed by the school board. And he noticed that at every meeting he would attend, there was a land acknowledgement taking place before the meeting. And it could be, from what he described, it could be quite lengthy and awkward and cumbersome. And he just simply wanted to raise the issue of like, do we really need to do this every time? Is this helpful? Is this beneficial? It's kind of wasting our meeting minutes. Like, we already kind of get the point. And he found there was immediate resistance to even just talking about it. Like, he didn't outright say, stop doing this. He just said, can we talk about it? And after he had a series of private meetings with various administrators, they just told him, no, we can't talk about this. We must do these because of something like human rights, reconciliation. It's our duty to do land acknowledgements every single meeting. So he's just frustrated by the school board imposing this on the school council, which is supposed to be independent of the school board. And he eventually worked with the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms to file for a judicial review to see if the school board is actually allowed to make the school council do this and ban discussion of the topic effectively. Catherine Cronus had a sort of similar situation.
Just before you go on to Catherine Cronus, you say, what did they discover then? Was the school board obliged to do this, or were they just saying it and pretending that they were obliged?
I think my interpretation is the school board essentially is deciding that they're obliged. I think
nobody's told them so.
I'm not aware that anyone above the school board has told them. It's just sort of this nebulous net of kind of like DEI professionals within the school board has decided we must do these and they're good, and stop talking about it and toe the line.
All right, fair enough. I mean, it'd be interesting to know whether the provincial government in Ontario was pushing this along as well, or whether this is just do-gooders trying to do good. Anyway, you were going on to talk about another example. Can I get you to go back to that, please?
Yeah, sure. So Catherine Cronus was the other example from Ontario as well, and she is on a separate school council. And before the meeting, there was a land acknowledgement happening, and during her introduction or opening remarks, she simply just said, she just gave a critique for, I think she only spoke for less than a minute of, I don't think these land acknowledgements are helpful. I don't really agree with this being part of the meeting. And then she moved on. So she just gave a sort of a polite disagreement with the land acknowledgement taking place before all these meetings. And the meeting went on. And then afterwards, she received an email, and she had been suspended from her position on the school council. And the school board, they even claimed that her words had caused harm, supposedly, and they didn't really give her any specific reason, but she was suspended.
Well, hold
So
on. Now, is she suspended? Like, who suspended her? And I mean, was she given any opportunity to talk about why she said what she said?
no, no. So they just outright suspended her from her position with no notice, and very little explanation, and even accused her of causing harm just by speaking politely for a few seconds.
No, she didn't take that lying down, did she?
No, so she was quite shocked by this, and she also, with help from the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, had a lawyer contact them and explain that you can't just suspend Mrs. Cronus for doing this. And she was reinstated back to her position. However, then a few months later, the school board decided that at school councils, we can no longer have any audio or video recording. Presumably, this was related to the fact that she had released this recording of her saying her piece at the beginning of the meeting that led to her getting suspended, and it kind of drew attention online and a lot of sympathy for her position and made the school board look really bad. So in the future, they said no more recordings. And then the JCCF followed up with another letter saying you can't just ban the parents from recording their meetings. It's another violation of their freedom of expression. So the school board seems very adamant to impose just their viewpoint and not have this discussed by the public, or not have any critics in their midst.
So now you've interviewed these two individuals and heard their stories. You have your own personal experience to draw upon at the University of Victoria, and it seems that there is a real desire to do this. Now, here's the thing. The people who are giving the land acknowledgements are Canadian citizens living in Canada. A lot of them have bought houses. They own their own property, they think. And and every time they get into a public setting, they say something like, well, we're just squatters here. Really, it's actually yours, and we acknowledge that. But, and then they kind of surprised, as they were in British Columbia recently, when a court says, well, yeah, actually, you are squatters and you need to pay. What is the matter, George? I know you studied kinesiology, not psychology or the psychiatry of the bent mind, but what do you make of it, George? I mean, what are these people not getting?
Well, I think in part of my criticism of land acknowledgement, like I just like to think of the fundamental premise. So like, what are we actually saying when we say someone else owns the land? Like, what does that mean to own the land? And a problem I see with these land acknowledgements is they not only imply there should be a legal ownership of the land, but there's also this like spiritual element and sort of guilt-based and solemn element of a different group inherently owning the land. And like something Jeff Horseman said in my interview is like, I don't think there's anything good that's going to come from tying one racial group as being the true inheritors of all of nature in sort of this spiritual element, and then everyone else as sort of this unworthy group that shouldn't actually be here. And like you pointed out in British Columbia, there's all this contention now with property rights and who actually owns the land in a legal sense beyond the spiritual element. So I think with these land acknowledgements, there's actually a lot being said in between the lines, and we should really slow down a minute and just like unpack like what we're actually doing and what we want the outcome to be.
Well, I think I agree with you, George. But there is an even bigger picture. You connect land acknowledgements to other recent examples of compelled speech in Canada, and it's the compelled speech that is the bigger picture. But we're talking about, for instance, Jordan Peterson's fight over pronouns and Barry Neufeld's Human Rights Tribunal case. This is the gentleman who sat on a school board in the Lower Mainland and actually said, well, boys are boys and girls are girls, and why are we trying to what is that? SOGI, is it? That sexual orientation, gender instruction program that they have. He was basically saying that he had a fundamental philosophical difference of opinion as a representative of parents on a school board to what the government was pushing. So you've got Jordan Peterson. They wanted him to use pronouns. You've got Barry Neufeld. They wanted him to say something that he didn't believe. And you've got the issue that we've just been talking about of these highly agenda-driven land acknowledgements. Now, how do these phenomena collectively threaten charter-protected freedoms of thought, belief, and expression? And what role have universities and public education played in normalizing this trend?
Yeah, so there's a lot of these different topics that are focused on different issues relating to various identity groups that have become super contentious in our culture and society, largely because of what's taking place at university. And a big problem today is that we've equated words and thoughts with literal harm, or even in some cases, violence. So my disagreement with land acknowledgements, like behind my back, I know in my personal life, I've been called things like, "Oh, I might be racist," right? Or like, I might be bigoted, just because of my opinion, which is just coming from a philosophical standpoint, and from my view, just like a basic premise of we should all just be equal and treated as equals. So within academia, uh, we're sort of all walking on eggshells right now on all these various topics. And the problem with conflating words with being harmful is that if someone is saying words that we disagree with, we need to shut them down because they're causing harm. And this is a very prominent mindset within universities, especially in certain cities like where I'm from in Victoria. So you're only getting one side of the debate is being supported and platformed by the institution in many cases, whether that's coming through like official policy or it's just like an unspoken social mandate that is taking place. And this is a problem way beyond land acknowledgements. And like my essay, my article was about specifically a land acknowledgements, but the point, like you said, is much deeper than that. It's really about the compelled speech, the groupthink, and the reaction to even having this conversation.
Well, you have pushed back, and through you and you're talking about other people who have pushed back through groups like the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedom, which, like C2C, is a sort of a very freedom orientated organization. Um, and you seem to be somewhat confident that the Overton window can shift. The Overton window, for those who are not techies in this area, is just a sort of an idea of a space in which whatever you say is fine, but if it's outside, but you can move the windows so that now the forbidden speech can be safely said. You think that we can actually move the Overton window so that we can get back the freedom to say no to things that we don't want to say yes to? Really?
I hope so.
You're an optimist.
Yeah,
I love it.
I think in the long run, it's possible. I mean, even some of your listeners might be not that many of your listeners are avid CBC fans, but even the CBC released recently a documentary called Speechless, which was an investigation into universities and this sort of like cult-like thinking and free speech issues and people that have been canceled. And I watched it and I was actually quite surprised that this was coming from the CBC. It was actually quite well done. And it clearly was taking the position that we need to get back to free discourse and not canceling people and having civil conversations. So I do think the Overton window is moving, and we're moving to a more like relaxed society. Hopefully, I think it will take time. Canada, especially on certain issues like the whole gender identity versus sex debate, Canada is quite far behind some other nations like the United Kingdom and the United States that are moving a little forward. But I think we'll get there eventually.
Well, I hope you're right. What is your vision for a Canada that genuinely protects both the right to speak what one believes and the right to remain silent? How realistic is that? and I'm asking you as to answer this question with in mind the people you've been at university with, who have bought the program because the program was there to be bought, and they come from houses where mom and dad put a little placard on. This was unbelievable. This is one of the things you said in your essay there. They actually have a little sign on the front lawn with a perpetual land acknowledgement. Well, I mean, if kids are growing up in that environment and told to be very sensitive and very careful what they say, are we talking about are you the last man standing in a lost generation?
It could definitely feel like that sometimes. Yeah, a lot of like my peers on these issues, they don't necessarily know very much about it, but they just know what position is safe for them to take. Like on the whole, in indigenous and land acknowledgements issues, I don't claim to really know an awful lot about like the history of indigenous relations and all that, but neither do my peers, and my peers probably even know less about history than I do, and yet they're adamant that I'm wrong and I'm the bigot and they're right for just going along with it. So I do think it will take more people to kind of step out of line. And like one thing I mentioned in the article is the reference to the Ash conformity experiments. And it basically in those experiments, the more people who step out of line and say the true thing, it encourages others to follow. So if there's only one person, it's very unlikely that other people are going to step out of line. But if there's two or three, it's much more probable that other people will break free from their conformity. But I also think it's going to take some changes from the top down. Like all these institutions, all these administrators, all these bureaucrats that are pushing these policies onto institutions like universities, and in municipal, provincial governments, I think we're going to need to see a bit of a change of the leadership.
Well, that's where you have to follow the money, because when people get into those jobs, they hold them on condition that they don't step out of line. Because any administrator who actually came out of the closet and supported the point of view that you were saying would find himself capped at that position, and they probably work to get him out of the way. We have a person in Calgary here, Frances Widowson, who is quite outspoken on the issue. And even though she was a tenured professor, they found a way to fire her with cases before the courts. Now, look, we're out of time, which is a great shame, because I'd like to talk to you for a while, but I'm very encouraged by what you wrote about what you did with the experience that you had. And I know you want to develop a career in another area, but I hope that you hang on to this interest and that you become a strong spokesman for this point of view. It's not just the land claims, it is the whole idea that we can be told what to say and then must repeat it back like a parrot. So bless your heart. Thank you for this. Great job on the essay. And ladies and gentlemen, for the Western Standard, I'm Nigel Hannaford.